Thanks for joining me this week on All About Data, a conversation with chief data officers and the people who are making data work better in government. On today's episode, how the Department of Veterans Affairs is delivering personalized services to veterans. Here to talk about it is Barbara Morton, the Deputy Chief Veterans Experience Officer at the VA. Barbara, thanks for joining us.
Oh my gosh, thanks so much for having me, Joy. Great to be with you today.
Great to have you. And Barbara, there's so much that the VA has been working on when it comes to delivering this veterans focused experience in all that it does. And the Veterans Experience Office has always been at the core of all of that. Can you tell me how the Veterans Experience Office got started back in 2015 and how it's evolved and changed and grown over time?
Yeah, absolutely. So VEO, as we were talking a little bit before, celebrated its 10-year birthday, 10-year anniversary back in January of this year. And we really kind of came to bear really out of a crisis, first and foremost, of course, for veterans and their supporters, but also for the department. And this is way back in 2014, actually, as a result of the Phoenix VA access crisis, where veterans were waiting too long for their appointments. So I always kind of tell the story as a level set because it was really a wake up call for us as a department, I think, in the sense of we always typically focus on KPIs that are operational in nature. So, right, number of appointments scheduled, timeliness, things of that nature. But what we realized with the results of Phoenix is that we had a blind spot. And the blind spot was the ability for us, VA, to sort of understand from our customer perspective what was working, what wasn't working for them. And so really it was a moment of opportunity for us to reimagine how we want to hold ourselves accountable to those we serve and how we want to make sure that we measure our performance based on what they think of us. So certainly the operational measure is very important, but what is their experience with us? How are veterans judging us? How are they rating us? And really that's kind of how our office came to being back in January 2015.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you for recapping the brief history of VEO and its 10-year anniversary. Can you maybe go back to a little bit more of this idea of what wasn't working, what was working, how VEO and the VA more broadly is now collecting and acting on feedback from veterans as they give it and incorporating that into the customer experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things back in 2015 when VEO was first stood up is we understood that we really had an opportunity to rebuild a trust that had been broken with veterans and others that we served. And so one of the first things that we wanted to do was really elevate the measure of trust and also making interactions with VA easy, effective, and resonant with those that we serve. We wanted to elevate those as key performance indicators, again, to hold ourselves accountable to those experiences. And so with all the concepts of customer experience, I can tell you back in 2015, 2016, people sort of looked at that concept in government a little bit with curiosity, but a little bit of like, how on earth does that apply to us? And so what we wanted to do is initially prove the concept in terms of how we VA could collectively operationalize what it means to deliver outstanding services to veterans based on what they need, moments that matter most to them. And so we started in partnership with our wonderful siblings at the Veterans Health Administration and really started at ground zero. We wanted to repair the trust in the patient experience. And so we went out, we talked to veterans from all across the country. Always the starting point is talk to those that you serve to really understand what were the moments that mattered most to them in their healthcare experience with VA. What were the pain points? What were any of the bright spots? And we used that information, that data and insight, those insights to design VA's first ever patient experience program. We also modeled after industry. So when we were doing research with our customers to help shape and mold our services according to what they wanted and what mattered most to them, we were also talking to industry leaders in private sector to understand what are your best practices and how do we bring those in and adapt them to government to replicate that so veterans and those that we serve can experience that. So started with the patient experience build. That was roughly in 2017, starting in 2017. And we also wanted to start measuring these experiences across VA. And so we started measuring, again, these key experience measures of trust, making things easy, effective, and emotionally resonant for veterans. And we've seen improvements. We're now at 92% trust, for outpatient healthcare at VA, which is an increase from 85% when we started the measurement 10 years ago. And it's really just been a build upon build upon build year over year, just becoming more mature in our data collection and sort of actioning data. We spend time across the field in medical centers, helping them understand the moments that matter in their facility and action plan around, sort of those moments that matter to make sure that we're being consistent and holding ourselves accountable to outstanding service delivery at scale.
Staying on this topic of metrics that matter, can you tell me a little bit more about how VA goes about gathering that feedback from veterans, how they get those trust scores, and how they get these other KPIs?
Sure. Yeah, so we have so VEO is sort of unique in the sense of, we know that VA has tons of data, right? And we never want to be just collecting data, not acting on it. So we want to make sure that we can collect it, understand it, and then translate it into something concrete. So one of the ways that we do that is through a practice that you're probably very familiar with, and hopefully your listeners are as well, which is called human-centered design. Industry best practice, essentially a very fancy way of saying before you think you know what problem you're trying to solve and devote resources to it, go out and talk to the people that you're serving and make sure that that aligns with what they're wanting, and also be open to the fact that, they may need or want something different. So pivot your resources to address those particular pain points. So we have a wonderful human-centered design shop in-house of career FTE who have a wonderful experience, not only sort of in VA and sort of understanding the business, but also in sort of the practice of design. So that's kind of one channel of data that we collect. Use those insights to create things like journey maps to help us understand where we should focus our attention and resources. The other set of data that we collect, which I alluded to before, is through surveys. So we have near real-time customer experience surveys. We've got about 150 of them live, spanning across healthcare, benefits, memorial services, and appeals, to really, again, elevate experience and sort of how veterans measure our performance as a KPI for us to hold ourselves accountable to. And so we use these surveys to really kind of, help with action planning and, again, addressing any particular issues that are coming up with folks across the field. And, it's a wonderful mechanism to be able to monitor, again, in real time if things are bubbling up. Folks that are our partners in the field are able to sort of see those survey results and things kind of trending upwards or downwards. The last thing I'll mention here too, and we talk about sort of healthcare as the proof of concept, but VEO is what we call an enterprise-wide shared service. So we actually support the entire department across healthcare, benefits, memorials, and appeals. And we also have a survey that really shows at the highest level what veterans who are using any of our services are feeling. And the trust in VA across any of the business lines now stands at about 79%, up from 55% when we first started measuring it back in 2015, 2016. So really an incredible news story. I think a testament to our frontline teammates at VA who are empowered now to deliver great experiences based on the voice of those we serve.
All great things there, Barbara. It's really hard to overestimate just how big the VA is and all
Yes.
that it does. I mean, when you talk about obtaining these services from the VA, you're talking about the healthcare side of things, you're talking about the benefit side of things, and then you're talking about trying to reach them over the phone, online, in person. It is a lot of surface area to cover here. Just to unpack those things a little bit more, can you tell me how the VA is continuing to iterate and further improve its experience, whether you are going in person, on the phone, or online?
Yeah, so that's a wonderful question, and I think one of the things, probably in government at large, but particularly at VA, our clients, our customers span all ages, generations, demographics, locations. So we've got to be able to reach everybody in a way that makes most sense to them. So the strategies that we employ have to take in that multidimensional facet of our customer base. So you can talk about, a lot about, there are lots of orientation and interest in AI and sort of digital footprint. VA.gov and the VA mobile app, which has a 4.8 out of 5-star rating on par with industry, is a perfect example of how we VA design the digital experience with and for users. And so that's kind of like a unique way that we approach that digital footprint here in VA. But what about the folks who don't really feel as comfortable online? One of the things that VA, my office, does is we sponsor one of two 24/7 live agent answer contact centers. It's called 1-800-MY-VA-411. So for veterans or family members, others that we serve, caregivers, survivors who may not be as digitally inclined, if they need to talk to a live real person 24/7, we have that phone number available for them. So really, I think kind of the idea of listening to what matters most to those that we serve and creating those multiple channels is really, really critical. And I think that the next generation with AI coming online is going to help us VA be even more timely, more responsive to all of those needs. But wanting to make sure we keep all channels available and open to meet veterans and others that we serve where they are.
Absolutely. It's kind of a wonky idea, but this omni-channel experience of
Yes.
making sure it's a quality experience, regardless of how the veterans prefer to contact you guys, is the
Yes.
general idea here.
Yep. Exactly. Yep.
You bring up another great point here, Barbara, which is this idea of personas that different demographics are going to want to interact with the VA in different ways. A Gulf War veteran is going to have different preferences, perhaps, than a post 9/11 veteran. There's obviously age as a component to that. Women veterans might have different needs.
Yep.
The fastest growing demographic of the veteran population, by the way. So, just as far as those personas, managing those, understanding the needs, the preferences, and everything that's bound up in that, can you maybe unpack that a little bit further?
Yeah, and what I would say, and oftentimes one of the favorite parts of this job as I sit in this seat is speaking with other siblings across federal agencies who are in this space and doing building and growing the customer experience capability in their own area as well. And one of the things I always say is it's such a dynamic environment for everybody that we serve across government. But the starting point, and I truly believe this, if we remain faithful to the practice of human-centered design and always making sure that if we have a particular population or persona group that we need to reach and address, always start with understanding them from them directly and then designing solutions around that. That to me is sort of an antidote to any potential challenges down the road, in the sense of, hey, this system doesn't quite work, or hey, this communication is not quite clear. When you design with and for whatever persona, whatever customer base, whatever age group you have, you're always going to set yourself up as an organization for greater success down the road, because it's been vetted and co-designed and pressure tested with the people who are actually going to be recipients of it. So I think, shaping and molding any type of service delivery by incorporating the voices and perspectives of those that we're serving is really a key to outstanding service delivery.
We were talking briefly about this. The Veterans Affairs Office, or the Department of Veterans Affairs, is a high impact service provider. There are not very many of them across government, and it's an important distinction for a lot of reasons. It obviously reflects how the VA does serve so many veterans in this country. It does deliver a high volume of the customer experience,
Yes.
but also is kind of a model for other agencies to aspire to. And so, can you tell me a little bit more about what it means to be a HISP agency?
Well, I think that designation, and I love how you just said it. It is, in a lot of ways, it is an honor, in the sense of really having the visibility of leadership, particularly in the executive office of the president, OMB, as well, and really being able to kind of showcase. We've been on this journey at VA since 2015, so we've had a little bit of a head start on many other of our sibling teams, sister agency teams that are building. But I think it's a wonderful way for us to keep the voice of the people up front and center, with leadership all the way up and down the chain in the executive branch. And so I'm incredibly grateful that VA has the designation. I'm incredibly grateful for our OMB CX team, who really have been the architects to help all of us as agencies really orient around the person, making sure that we give the bureaucracy, and I say this with love in my heart, a hug, but as I said a couple weeks ago, move it to the side and let the people that we serve step forward and be the focal point, and have the bureaucratic processes and mechanisms work around their needs rather than serving as a barrier to their needs. So I think it's incredibly significant that we have a HISP program. The Government Service Delivery Improvement Act has been another incredible driver, really codifying the HISP framework for now and going forward. And I think as we imagine what government for the people looks like, I think there's so much more opportunity for us to spread these practices across agencies large and small, because at the end of the day, as public servants, we are the people. We're here to serve the people, and making sure that we can always elevate the voices of those that we serve to drive how agencies are executing, to me is nirvana. So I'm just proud to be a part of the HISP community, and anything that we VA have sort of learned along the way, always happy to share that with our sibling agencies and learn from them as well.
Well, to that point, spreading this to other agencies, one thing that's probably worth shining a spotlight on is VA's work with the CX cookbook, kind of breaking
Yeah.
this down into its component pieces for agencies that are maybe a little bit earlier on in the learning
Yes.
curve here.
Yeah. So the cookbook, I'm so glad you brought that up. It's one of my proudest products for our VA team here, and Team VEO. And this was really kind of harkening back to earlier days. Back in 2020 is when we published it, but I would say it still holds true today. And what it essentially does is it breaks down kind of all the different levers and mechanisms in government that are common across agencies. We wanted to make sure that all of our sibling agencies across federal would really kind of see the opportunity in literally every nook and cranny of our bureaucratic framework and structure, whether it's governance, whether it's budget, whether it's strategy, whether it's agency or individual performance measures. We just wanted to put that on paper. And so we actually co-designed it with a number of our teammates across federal government, in addition to OMB. And we hope that it's a useful resource, one that's not just sort of theory, but actually very, very practical. I was sharing this with a colleague of mine earlier. As much as I am somebody who is incredibly philosophical and kind of looks for this, again, nirvana of a government for the people, I'm also very practical. And so my hope is that the cookbook gives very practical, tangible tools, breadcrumbs, if you will, for other organizations to pick up and create their own recipe. I say that in quotes because every agency is different. Every group of Americans that they're serving is different. The leadership, the culture is different. So the goal was to give enough options for different agencies to possibly consider and utilize to create their own specific recipe, and really seed in their customer experience capability and make it grow and build from there.
To zero in on one of the ingredients of all this, the technology, the tools of the trade
Yeah.
here. You mentioned briefly in the first half how AI is one of these things that is evolving and transforming this space, making more things possible, augmenting the work of the employees. Can you maybe talk about where you
Mhm.
see AI being a useful tool for CX improvements going forward?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I have sort of two perspectives on AI. So I think can be incredibly helpful to meet the goals of being as efficient and effective, and easy as possible. So where it can be helpful in meeting those goals, I think that is wonderful, and I think that we as government should be full force, ready to embrace it and utilize it. I say it with a little bit of caution on the other side, though, because I tend to think that sometimes new technologies can, people can be enamored with that and think that that can be the silver bullet that fixes everything. But one of my dear colleagues here at VA said a couple weeks ago, you can't automate empathy. And I think that is such a profound statement in the sense of we are serving people. If we can make things more efficient and easy through AI and automation and all these technological enhancements, I think that's wonderful. However, we are serving people, and people have interactive needs. They have human needs that a machine might not be able to answer. So I would caution all of us to not lose sight of the person that we are serving. Yes, leverage AI to the absolute fullest, but not as the end all be all solution for every particular challenge we might come across. I bring us back to the concept of human centered design, sounding probably like a little bit of a broken record, but that has to always be the starting point, in my view. Always has to be the starting point. Talking to those that we serve, understanding how they want service delivery in a way that matters most to them and creates great impact for them, and then allow ourselves to be measured by their rating of us rather than, again, traditional operational metrics of performance. What is their adjudication of how we are doing? Because they should be the judges of how their government is functioning for them.
Yeah, that's just such a powerful sentiment here, this idea that you can't automate empathy,
Yep.
that there is some stuff that's uniquely human and something that is just really comes down to those basic soft skills of those
Yes.
frontline employees. And
Yep.
I think it's worthwhile to maybe stay on that topic of these frontline employees. And I know that the VA closely monitors employee experience just as much as they monitor the veteran experience, and that in
Yes.
many cases, those things are very inextricably intertwined. And so, can you tell me a little bit more about how VA sees employee experience as a driver of improved
Yes.
veteran experience?
Absolutely. So one of the things in the early days of VEO, so I joined in July of 2016, and I remember even back then, there was a lot of discussion about, okay, how do we VA set up the first of its kind customer experience office at VA, one of the first in federal government, and really focus on those that we serve, i.e., veterans, their families, caregivers, and survivors. At the same time, there was also a lot of questioning and wondering and curiosity about, well, shouldn't we apply the same type of framework and same type of thought process and same type of methodology, i.e., human centered design, to the employee experience? Because we know from industry and we know from other best practices that a dynamite employee experience will absolutely generate a great veteran or other customer experience. And so I see that they're kind of yings and yangs of each other. And so we VEO have built VA's first ever employee experience program, again, utilizing the same methodology, human-centered design, near real-time surveys, action planning. And that is, I would say, a journey that we continue to be on. It certainly is not as mature as our customer experience side of the house. But when we have the wonderful talent and infrastructure inside of VA, inside of VEO, there's more and more opportunity to kind of grow and mature that capability as we march forward.
Yeah. Going back to this idea of the digital tools behind
Mm-hmm.
VX, I think VA has been a pioneer in the space of this discipline of like no wrong door. That I think you guys did a lot of
Yes.
work with VA.gov to that effect.
Yep.
The basic idea being, there shouldn't be any wrong place to get the services that you're looking for, that veterans may not be and shouldn't be knowing all the ins and outs of going back to the
Yes.
bureaucracy of it all, that they should be like, here's who I am, here's the service I need, and the system kind of guiding them along. Can you maybe unpack a little bit more of how this digital front door, no wrong door approach took root at VA?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'll go back in time if you'll indulge me just a little bit. So
Please
this was
do.
back, yeah, right. Let's go to time, a little time capsule here. So back in 2018, we had a moment in time during the summer of 2018 where we VA started hearing signals from veterans that, hey, I need to interact with VA online, but I don't know which website to go to. We had at the time va.gov, vets.gov, My Healthy Vet, e-benefits, lots of front doors, and it was incredibly confusing to veterans and others that utilized our services. And so we decided to sort of take that feedback and say, okay, why don't we ask before we jump to solutions and before we jump to designing something, why don't we ask users of VA digital footprints, if you were going to transact with the department, which one of those websites would you naturally gravitate towards? And they came back to us, and veterans said, you know what, we think va.gov is where we'd go if we didn't know where to go. And that was sort of the first time in my career that I recollect a secretary level decision. We took that to the then secretary at the time to say, hey, we've got to do better for veterans in our digital footprint. We are scattered. We have too many digital front doors. We recommend consolidating based on the voice of those that we serve under the banner of va.gov. And so that decision was made back in 2018. It's been a years long build, but we also didn't stop with just funneling everybody to va.gov. We actually changed the entire interface. So prior to 2018, va.gov, say this again with love in my heart, but looked very corporate, very bureaucratic, an announcement of the president's budget, a picture of the White House. things that really veterans and users of VA services don't care about and honestly shouldn't. So what we did is we redesigned va.gov based on what? Based on what matters most, top transactions to veterans, making it easy for them to utilize based on co-design and their feedback, human-centered design, to make it what it is today. And so you'll see those enhancements and sort of consolidation of websites under the banner of va.gov. But I think the main takeaway is that was based directly on veteran insights, veteran feedback. So we didn't cook up a solution ourselves inside the four corners of the department. We actually asked those that we serve what would be most useful to them and designed with and for and around that. The next generation, of course, of anything digital is the mobile app. And I mentioned this at the outset, something to be really proud of, that we VA have been able to earn a good report card from veterans and users about the mobile app, 4.8 out of 5 stars. That is on par with other industry leaders. And I always say this a little bit tongue in cheek. We're able to earn that score not because we're special. It's because we're designing with those that utilize our services to respond to what they want and deliver it. So to me, it's really always room for improvement. We're always striving to do the best that we possibly can. But I think that's a really concrete use case to prove the concept of how powerful the framework and usage of human-centered design and incorporating our customers into our build and solutions, how powerful that is to produce great results for those that we serve.
That was Barbara Morton, the Deputy Veterans Experience Officer for the Department of Veterans Affairs. You can find more data coverage on federalnewsnetwork.com. I'm Jory Heckman, and thanks for listening to this episode of All About Data.